Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. It's lovely to see you again. This is one of my projects, and it's called Melody of the Night, and it's charted by Artecy, and I'm using a 25 count fabric even weave. But I've been having problems with this chart, and I don't know whether they would be considered problems or it's just something that I'm personally experiencing with my chart, and I've been trying to figure out in my head how to kind of rectify it, or get things back in order again with working with this chart. So basically, starting from the beginning, I started this chart earlier in the year, and it's absolutely beautiful. I'm totally in love with this chart. And I started doing my usual 2/1 tent, which is two strands over one hole. So basically I work with the two strands together all the time. I stitch in one hole and then I park directly underneath. And I don't know why, because this is a method I've been doing for most of my charts until recently. I haven't been having any problem with my other charts that I've been doing the exact same method with the two strands, half stitch, and for some reason this chart I was really struggling. So I had to kind of, stop and think about what it is that's going wrong. So firstly, it's not that I fell out of love with this chart. It was more the fact that I was kind of reticent to pick it up, that I wasn't really going to it willingly, and I wasn't feeling the urge, and I was thinking, what is bothering me about this chart that when I pick it up I don't want to do very much on it. So yeah, it was getting a little bit neglected. So this is something I wanted to figure out. As you can see, I'm working kind of like in steps, and I'm parking every thread just below the square that I'm working on. So all my threads are parked ready to go when I get down to that square, which is great. I've often done that method. However, looking at this chart, and after working on it for a while, I've realized that it is absolutely crazy when it comes to bulk. And there is so many colors in the one little square. It's really bulking up with so many strands. But here's a typical square of this chart. And you can see there's a lot of stops, a lot of starts. In fact, any of these squares, as far as I've been going, they're really crazy. Loads and loads of colors. So as you can imagine, if you're parking your strands in those squares, there's going to be a lot of strands in bulking up in that one square. So you're probably saying, well, why don't you just do cross country? Well, no, cross country is something I've tried, and I nearly always fail. I get the counting wrong, even if I've got a grid. It just doesn't work for me. I do love the parking method, but I needed to get to grips with the parking method on this particular chart, because no two charts are the same. And for some reason, I think this chart is worse than the other ones I'm doing. And it was just crazily bulking up. For instance, I can show you here. Look how many strands are bulked up in that one square. So if you're actually working in rows, which is the way I work a lot of the time in these squares, you are up against pulling these all apart, trying to find your hole, getting in the middle. So basically, at the end of the day, we're just talking bulk. And at the back, it's really difficult to push my needle through. It's getting really knotty and bumpy at the back. And it's just not being an enjoyable experience. And I'm just finding myself not willing to pick up this chart because of the fact it's so heavy confetti. And I, for one, I'm always telling people, if you're not enjoying it, you have to reconsider what's going wrong. Think about your choices you've made. How can you, change it if you can change it? Is there anything you can do? So this is what I've come up with, and I've come up with a solution for me. And this is a solution that I'm making halfway through my chart. Well, not really halfway, but I've done a good lot of this chart. So I'm already 9,900 stitches in. I'm at the brink of 10,000 stitches. So these are my options. Number one, ditch it and start again. And then I think to myself, do I really want to start this chart all over again? The answer is no, I don't. The other option then is to just stop working on it and don't do it. Just kind of put it away and forget about it. Do I want to forget about it? No, because I really like the chart and I would like to see a finish. So I'm going to have to find some happy medium in the middle somehow. That's going to help me enjoy working on this a little bit more than I have been doing. So I'm going to explain to you what I've come up with, and this may not be for you. And if you like your 2 strands over one and you don't find it bulky and you're happy with it, that's absolutely brilliant. You just keep going with that. I, however, am struggling a little bit and I need to modify this somehow so that I will continue with it happily without feeling, you know, begrudged about it or anything like that. So basically, I've been working 2 strands and I've decided, well, to reduce the bulk, the only thing I can really do with so much parking is go down to 1 strand. But I'm doing tent, so how can I go down to 1 strand? Because mostly when you use 1 strand, you are just doing 1 cross with 1 strand. So that's 2 times that your 2 legs over your stitch. I've got 2 strands going over my stitch, which is the tent stitch. So how do I do it? If I go down to 1 strand, I'll have to do full crosses. If I do full crosses, it's not going to look the same as the tent. It would be okay to switch to full crosses if I just started and I'd only done a square or 2. That wouldn't really show up. But if I would just continued now with 2 crosses and 1 strand, it is going to look slightly weird. It's just, you might not notice when it's on the wall, but I don't think it would look right. All the stitches are moving in a rightward direction. I could always do my second leg of a cross in the right direction, but I just think the texture is going to be slightly off. It's just not going to be the same. So what's the next option? The next thing I come up with is, how about I do 1 strand and I just double my leg. So instead of using the 2 strands and doing 1 stitch, I'm then going to get rid of one of the strands and do my stitch twice with the 1 strand. And there's your tent stitch. 2 legs from bottom left to top right. So if I do that twice with the 1 strand, I've got my tent stitch. Now you're probably saying, oh my God, that's going to take you twice as long. That's the same as doing a full cross. Well, yes, it is. It's going to take me twice as long because I have abandoned the faster method of doing the stitch once for actually theoretically doing the stitch twice. But when you're doing a full cross, you are doing the same thing. You are doing 2 legs once and then twice. So it's exactly the same as if I'm doing a full cross now, except I'm going to be crossing my stitch doing a tent stitch instead of the cross. So I'll be doing bottom left to top right, coming back into the bottom left and back into the top right. So I'm just doing my tent stitch twice with 1 strand instead of once with 2 strands. Now I hope that makes sense to you. So what I've been doing is, after deciding that that's the way I'm going to continue, and it might make it more enjoyable for me because I'll be able to handle these threads a lot better, I have already streamlined them to 1 strand. So basically I've done my stitches and I'm going to continue with the stitch here and show you. So here I've got a 2-stranded stitch. I'm going to do that one, if I can see my pattern keeper, and show you. So I want to reduce this to 1 strand. But I'm going to work the stitch in 2 strands first so that I have it secured. So there's my ordinary 2 strands. Now, when I go to park or whatever it is, say I go to park down here, I've got 2 strands running along the back of my canvas. That's going to create a lot of bulk when you do that multiple times. But if I'm going down to single strands, I'm only going to have 1 strand going down the back of my canvas every time I park. So that's going to reduce it by half. So I've done 1 stitch there, and the next instance of my stitch, let me just check, is here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull, this is me being quite brave. I've done it a few times though and it has worked fine. I've pulled my 2 stitches through. I've got my scissors and I'm just going to snip 1. Okay, now I'm down to my single strand. I can see a little bit sticking out there of that one stitch. I'm going to actually do this stitch instead of just leaving it parked, so you can see what I'm going to do. So I've gone down from 2 to 1. The other way, if you're frightened to do that, you can just, when you've finished your thread, you can start again with the one strand. So now I'm going to do the way I want to continue doing it. So I'm going to do my stitch, bottom left, top right, coming in again, bottom left to top right. There, I've done my stitch. Now it's more or less looking exactly the same as the other tent stitches, because it is a tent stitch. It's just 2 strands over one hole, and I'm going to park it somewhere down here. I don't need that thread anymore, so I'm just going to leave it there. So basically I've gone from 2 strands to 1, and if you were to see what was happening from behind, if I can part these threads out of the way, you'll see that I've gone from this stitch to this stitch. So there's going to be thread coming down there. I'm going to cover that up now with all my other threads. So I should be fine. That should be anchored okay. I've been doing that sometimes and I haven't had a problem. If I have a problem, I would go back and I would probably not cut my strand in half in the middle of the stitch. What I probably would do is finish my thread and then start my one strand as a new thread, if you feel safer doing that. I'm trying to reduce the bulk. So this is working for me. So I've basically gone from 2 strands to 1 in these 2 sections. Still kind of working on that. So it's a little bit of an experiment, and, you know, trying to find a way to continue with this chart that I'd find a bit more enjoyable. Now I can already see that when I lay these threads flat, it's going to be easier for me to do all this confetti. It's much easier for me to pick up one strand and do the ones underneath than it has been in this chart to be parting double the amount of threads here. Really struggling with it a bit. And I don't know why it's this one, because it hasn't been happening to some of my other charts where I'm doing the 2 strands. But in this particular chart, I've been struggling with the amount of bulk. So this has been my workaround. And so you're probably saying, but it's going to take you double the time. Well, it's probably better, because you have to think of this as a compromise. I've already been through my options. I've decided I don't want to ditch the chart. I've decided I'd like to continue with this chart. I don't want to start all over again, although that is an option. You could tick that box. You could say, well, you know, I'm not happy doing what I'm doing. I want to start the whole thing again. It's perfectly fine. Or you could just continue with what you're doing if you want to. I'm just not enjoying it. And if I'm not enjoying it, then something has to change for me. Otherwise, I would just ditch it. I probably won't go and do it as much. So being brave, I've gone down from 2 strands to 1 strand. So as I continue down, I'm going to be doing the same. With these squares, I'm going to work on my square, and when I go and park underneath, I'm going to park with 1 strand, not 2. And like that, so I've got my 2 strands here, I'll do all my stitches, and then when I come down and park, I'm going to take 1 strand away. And I'm basically converting this from 2 strands to 1. So yes, it's going to take me twice as long, but maybe I'll just enjoy it a little bit more. And also, if you think about it, it's no different to doing the full cross, except I'm doing the 2 legs in the same direction. So it's like I'm changing my tent, 2/1 tent to 1/1 tent but I'm doing the 1/1 tent twice. So this is getting complicated. Now, this is not something I'm going to do ever again. You know, even though I've made my compromise and I've decided to give this a go, I wouldn't start a chart with 1 strand and do my 10 stitch twice, because I just think, you know, basically, you know, what's the point? Just either do a full cross, or if you really want to do it that way, fine. But for this chart, I'm going to continue that way because I think it'll make it more enjoyable. So this is a workaround. This is like a temporary fix, if you will. This is not something I would do. So if you're really struggling with your bulk, it is an option. It's not the best option, but it's an option. But I wouldn't start a chart with one strand and be doing the same stitch twice in tent, because that to me would seem like a silly way to start. I think if I got a high confetti chart, personally, I'm talking about myself here because I don't recommend, you do something that doesn't work for you. I'm just talking about just sharing the way I'm working and what I'm trying to do and the experiments that I'm making to see if they work for me. I would probably do a full cross. If the chart was heavily confetti, if I started this chart from scratch, I would probably do the one strand full cross. So I would have less bulk, obviously, not doing the tent with 2 strands. And I don't know, I just think full cross would be okay. But at the end of the day, what I've done is just given myself a little bit of practical leeway. So I've kind of, for me, this is what I call a compromise. I'm going to now double the time it takes me to finish, but maybe I enjoy that extra time doing the stitches that are more enjoyable to me. So if you understand how that kind of logic works for me, rather than start all from the beginning, which I don't fancy doing, I'm kind of modifying it to reduce my bulk and still maintain the same texture that I already have. So that's basically it. That's what I've come up with. And who knows, maybe when I get further down here, I'll find that it's, it could be that it doesn't work. But I think for now it is actually working. I'm quite enjoying the fact that I've got less strands here in all my holes. When I come down, when I look up here and I look how much bulk I've got in here, I know that I'm struggling to get all these threads out of my way. So basically, yeah, just a workaround. And you can, so if you're doing a chart and you're halfway through the chart and you're in a tent stitch with 2 strands and you think, I don't want to ditch this chart, but I don't want to continue because it's getting far too bulky, that is an option. It's not the best option, but it's something you can do to keep you going. So I'm going to do another stitch or 2, and here I've got my single strand. And I'm not even frightened if one of my stitches falls out, because I will go back and do it again. So that's 1 stitch, tent, and doubling it. So instead of doing a full cross now, I'm just doing the tent again and parking. And I can see through these threads to the fabric so much easier than I can with this bulky one up here and these bulky ones down here that are still in 2 strands. So I've compromised. It's not the best, it's not the worst, it's a compromise. Okay, I'm not exactly 100% thrilled that I've just doubled my time. So now I've got the 2 strands again. So I'm looking at where I'm at. Is it worth changing, or should I just continue with the 2 strands until I get to the bottom of this square, and then I can continue with the 1 strand? I think that might be best. So I'm just going to do my 2 strand tent here. I'm going to park. See, it's hard even to get the needle through these holes at the moment because of the fact that it's so confetti. That's one of the things I've been finding difficulty with, not enjoying so much, to be honest. That's probably why I've been putting this stuff aside and not working on it as much as I'd like to. I can see that I've got a 2 strand here again, and it's not a very long thread, so I'm wondering if I should just finish this thread when I get down to the bottom of the square, and then and I've missed a stitch as well up the top here. Yeah, so basically I'm going to finish this one with the 2 strands. So as you can see, with the 2 strands you're only working the stitch once because you've got your 2 strands going over the holes. going to continue with those 2 strands, which is the safest way, because cutting a strand off while it's in stitch is probably a little bit more brave. But I am just trying to be pretty brave. So now in this stitch I've got the 1 strand, and that's what I want to continue with. I want to start phasing out the 2 strands now, continuing with 1 strand. So obviously instead of once, I'm going to have to do this one twice, so that it makes the same amount as the previous one. Now what I have noticed is that it's pretty much the same, but it's not exactly the same. When you work with the 2 strands together and do the 1 stitch with the 2 strands, slightly thicker than if you do the strand twice, the 1 strand twice, and it's slightly flatter. So I don't know if this is going to make the hugest difference when I've done a huge amount of it, but I'm quite happy to carry on regardless, because I'm enjoying it more with the 1 strand, and also because they are facing the right direction. There are 2 strands in every hole, so it's the best compromise that I can make at this point. And I've done a mix here in this square of 2 strands over 1 and the 1 strand over 1 twice, and I don't really see nothing. I couldn't go back and say to you, oh, that's done with 1 strand, that's done with 2 strand. I can't tell really looking at it, and because of the fact I can't really tell, it all kind of looks the same. I'm prepared to continue like that. So that's my workaround method. You probably think I'm completely raving lunatic, but you know, sewing and embroidery and cross stitch is all about experimentation, and if you don't give things a try, if you don't try to think them through and see what works for you, you know, you're just going to end up stuck in the same spot. You're not going to progress to learning new things. Like I said, this isn't a method I would start doing any stitch, any cross stitch with. I wouldn't do 2 stitches with 1 strand as a 10 stitch, but I'm trying to find a way out that I will continue with, that I might enjoy more than I'm currently enjoying with the 2 strands. And I think, you know, part of the reason why I've been struggling with it could be the fact that it's a different fabric. Even though it is even weave, it's a different fabric to the Magic Guide that I'm used to using, which is already pre-gridded. I don't know whether that makes a difference. It doesn't really feel that different. The holes somehow feel a little bit smaller to me. I don't know why, but I'm pretty sure it is 25 count. So it could be a subtle fabric difference, and you know, getting the needle through the holes as well. It could also be the chart itself. The chart itself is pretty crazy, so I'm not enjoying that. Pretty much every square has got so many colours in it. I'm not enjoying the bulk that's happening with the 2 strands. So, you know, breaking this all down and thinking about it properly is what you should do. You should think about what you're currently doing. How can you improve it? Are you willing to improve it? Are you willing to do that compromise? I don't want to abandon it. I don't want to start again. So my compromise is that. My compromise is like kind of going into doing the full cross, but not doing a cross, if you will. So that's how I'm going to continue for now. And I think it is working for me. I'm already liking the fact that I've got 1 strand coming out these holes. Easier for me to pick up 1 strand, easier for me to thread 1 strand and to get it down into this. And when I'm coming back up, there's less bulk, like here where I've been doing the 2 strands. It's been getting really knotty, bulky. I'm not even able to come up the same hole exactly sometimes, and it's kind of slipping a little bit into other holes. So overall, a bit of a struggle. And now I'm struggling less now that I've switched. But yeah, it's going to take me a bit longer. But, you know, it's better that it takes me a bit longer than not doing it at all. So there's my little fix. And I don't know whether it would be of any use to you whatsoever. But it is something to think about. And I just wanted to share it because, you know, you never know, somebody's going to get into that same situation. They want to give it a try. Maybe it works for them, maybe it doesn't. Maybe they want to continue with the 2 strands in the same hole, or maybe they just, you know, decide to start the whole thing again. Perfectly fine. We're all individuals. We make our own choices, but it is nice to see what we're doing together, and we can learn from each other. And you know, it's nice to learn from all our experienced stitchers and people who've been doing it for a while, and see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I think that's one of the loveliest things about this community, is that we're helping each other along the way, showing each other what we're doing, and we can take it or leave it. That's the nice thing. Nothing is enforced on anybody. You can do it or you can not do it. It's entirely up to you. So thank you for watching today. Let me know what you think. I'm really getting excited now to convert in the same chart and see how it goes. For me at the moment, it's going really well. These are all my single strands. I've still got to pare these down to single strands, and when I'm coming along here. So I will come back at some point and show you my progress. Maybe when I finish this page along here, and I can show you, let's see this second page, if we can see any type of difference whatsoever between this page. I don't think there's going to be much difference, having a look at what I've already done with the 1 strand. But this is part of the experiment, and it's good to do, so we can know later on, and we can either take it or leave it in the future. So thanks again for watching. I hope it's made sense to you, and I'll see you again soon.